Hello, ladies, and welcome to the Liberated Woman Podcast. I am your host, Christiano Green, and I am a mindset coach for women, and I help women overcome rejection, self-doubt, self-sabotage, so they can find liberation and freedom in their lives. And I've got an amazing special guest on today, the amazing Emma Rickard, who is a sex and intimacy coach, Welcome, Emma.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So good to have you on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to us having a deep conversation around sex and intimacy and how that helps women to feel liberated in one way or all ways in their life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
excited.
Yeah, me too, Emma. So I'd love for you to maybe do a little bit of introduction to yourself and the work that you do so that the ladies listening can really understand exactly what we're going to be jumping into today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like Christiano said, I'm a sex and intimacy coach for women. And so I really help women to get rid of any old mindset that they have around sex. And I specifically love working with women who have been faking in sex, where they haven't had a voice, they've been afraid to say no, they've been afraid of rejection and things like that, and they just have this ingrained belief that their pleasure doesn't matter, but it does matter. And I really want to emphasize that you come first and you're responsible for your pleasure. And, it is something that you should really, cherish in your life. So that's the basis of what I do in my coaching is I really help you to unlock um, the the kinds of pleasure that is available to you and your body that you probably didn't know was. Yeah.
Wow, and that I can imagine from my understanding that this would happen to a lot of women, right?
Yes, yes. And it's funny because I actually thought that I was the only one who experienced this because growing up, I had friends who, they would brag about their sexual experiences and things like that. And I just used to be like, oh, wow, I wish that I could have that, but I just wasn't. I just wasn't. And from a somewhat young age, from being when I first became sexually active, I very quickly learned that it wasn't okay to say no to a man
Mm.
because either they would get cranky, they would get grumpy, sort of stroppy, and they'd be like, or I would be faced with this kind of like they would keep coming at me being like, oh, like why not? Like please, kind of, and like almost persuading and manipulating. And then eventually I would say
Pressing into
yes.
it, yeah. Mm.
Yeah, anyway. So and then anytime that I would say no, it was like, okay, that was it. Like it was a no from me, and then you just would never hear from them again. So it's kind of like I just ended up saying yes. And it got me into a lot of experiences that I feel a lot of shame around, that I've since let go of. But there
Yeah.
was a lot of times where I got myself into situations just purely because I was too afraid to say no. And yeah, so that's that's kind of my story, part of it anyway,
So when you're
and how
going
I
through
got
these
into this.
experiences and feeling like you're all on your own, are you suffering in silence, or are you like talking to your girlfriends and going like, bloody hell, like, why do you get all this bloody great sex and I'm like lumped with all this shit? Like, do you suffer in silence, or are you someone who would have communicated it? Like,
Yeah, no, never. I was very bad at communicating. I kept it all in. I didn't want people to know that I was like failing at sex. And there were a handful of people that I could kind of talk to, but it's still, I kind of turned it into a joke and I would sort of laugh at the fact of being like, oh my God, like you'll never guess what happened to me, like another crazy story, but really it was like, this is actually painful for me. Yeah.
Yes, and that's the thing. We always end up trying to do certain things like make a joke out of our trauma because, we don't really know how to process or deal with it effectively. So we turn it into a joke and, we tell all our friends the sexcapade, but really it was actually quite a traumatic experience, right?
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And I'm curious to understand that, like, because, like I said, as women, I know it's common that, like I said, they'll suffer in silence. They're not going to share this stuff. Do you find that some of the other friends or the ladies that are out there do the same thing? Like they're telling them about all this amazing sex when in fact maybe they're not actually enjoying it as much and they're trying to, like I said, either fit in or mask some of the real shit that's actually going on in their sex.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, lucky for some, there are definitely some women out there who just do enjoy sex no matter what. And I've since learned that for some women, it is actually really easy to have internal and then for the majority of us, it's actually quite difficult, which makes penetrative sex, um, it's not always going to lead to an orgasm. And then it kind of just, and a lot of women don't, including me, had a lot of guilt around taking our time or the amount of time that it would take. So yeah, so definitely I have friends who are like, I'm just like, they're always going to have good sex no matter what. But
Yeah.
since talking about it, there are definitely women out there who would either, like I did, make it seem better than it actually was, or yeah, just wouldn't talk about it at all. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, it comes with a lot of trauma around that as well. And it can have a lot of energetic blockages in your body and make you then not even want to partake in it as well, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. I actually stopped sleeping with men because it was just I just was like I I had been humiliated and degraded and I had my boundaries crossed so many times and I grew up not really having a great sex education and I didn't have a
Mhm.
really good thorough understanding about consent and boundaries as well and it just comes down again to the education that we got so
The old birds
yeah
and the bees story, right?
yeah, yeah. I can't even remember sometime in high school. It was like, this is the female parts, this is the male parts. There was no talk about pleasure. There was no talk about how long it takes a woman to orgasm or to reach climax. There was no talk about the arousal response in a female and then in a male. All of that kind of stuff just wasn't included. So yeah, and that's where I bring a lot of that education into my coaching that we really should have received when we were younger, when we were at the age where we were becoming sexually active.
Mm.
Yeah, so
So what is some of that education that maybe you can share with some of the ladies out there? Because I mean, of course, I'm a gay man, and so for me, that's all foreign to me. So you're going to
yeah,
educate me, but I'm sure there's plenty of women out there who still don't know, right? You've done the
yeah,
education, gone out
absolutely.
and figured all this stuff out for yourself, but what about the ladies out there who are probably struggling and maybe do need some education?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So one of the big things that I was like, oh my God, more people should know about this, was that only around 4 to 18% of women can actually orgasm just from penetration alone.
Wow.
So that is a very small amount of women who just through penetration, whether it's through a penis or whether it's through a toy or fingers or whatever it is, can reliably orgasm every time. So there's a massive, massive portion of women who are having penetrative sex and they're just not being able to get off and they think that there's something wrong with them,
Yes,
or
yes.
even, it could even be their partner. Or like me, they're just faking it because they just want it to be over with because it's really, I mean, it's pleasurable, but it's not enough. So that's a big one. And then also, um, something that I also learned only a couple of years ago since diving into this is that our clitoris has erectile tissue in it, and it takes anywhere from 15 minutes and all the way up to 40 minutes for the erectile tissue to be fully engorged. And that's when we actually get the most amount of pleasure. So it takes minimum 15 minutes, for the erectile tissue there to be fully engorged with blood. It enlarges, and then, the sensation is like so much better. And for some women, a lot of women, it's very common to even take 30 to 40 minutes for that to happen, which is why foreplay is so important, or, even just connecting or having some sort of erotic play before you even go into any kind of genital touch or penetration. So yeah, that's sort of the very tip of the iceberg in regards to what we actually don't even know about our own anatomy. There's erogenous zones, everyone knows the G spot, but not many people know of a few of the other zones that are in the area.
That are
So
just as
yeah,
important. Yeah.
yep.
And I can imagine with the time frame being 15 to 40 minutes, and maybe you're with some guy that you just picked up. It doesn't usually last that long, does it?
No, not
So
at
most
all.
women aren't going to even experience it, and as you said, they're going to think there's something wrong with them, and not share it with their girlfriends or talk about it at all because they don't want to be shamed saying, "What's wrong with you, girl? I can, orgasm in 2 minutes, right?" But it's reality. It's not the case, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. You're totally right. Yeah. And because it's not talked about, I mean, sex is very male oriented, and it has been for such a long time. I mean, just the fact
Yeah.
that we believe that sex has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then it ends when there's like a climax or, an orgasm or an ejaculatory experience. And then, that's kind of it. It's like, in the stuff that we see in the movies where they're sort of making out and then all of a sudden they're doing the deed and then they kind of just fall into the bed in a heap and they're all like, oh my goodness, and they're worn out. And it's like,
And
it's
that's exactly how these women are getting these perception of how they think it's supposed to be, because in the movies it's portrayed as hot, steamy, and boom, boom, shaka, like a 5 minute
yeah,
wonderful experience. When in fact, it can be a lot of different things. It can be fun, it can be messy, it can be, you know, hurtful, it can be like,
yeah. Can be awkward. Yeah, for
awkward,
sure.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Absolutely. And if you don't even realize, or, if you don't know what it is that you like, if you don't know how to ask for it, probably never going to have some really great experiences in sex that you could be, or that is available to you. Yeah.
mm. So then tell us, Emma, how did you get from being, like I said, ashamed and not having boundaries around it, not having good education around it, deciding that like this wasn't really going to be for you, maybe you were never going to experience that kind of pleasure, to then obviously going through your own transformation in that area to then helping women. So how did Emma get from there to today?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because oh man, sex was something that I just did not talk about. I was like a total prude when it came to that. Um, so I guess it began around about the time that I first experienced sex with a woman. And there was so much time that was dedicated to me. And I felt like my pleasure actually really mattered in that moment. And that's not something that I had experienced
I
before.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was being with a woman, and I was very lucky that the woman that I was with was, experienced in being with a woman. So that was good. And
Totally.
I, I had a lot of limiting beliefs, and I had a lot of this shame around what my vulva looked like. And back then I thought it was called a vagina. Most women do. I mean, that's another thing that we're not really educated about, is the entire external part is actually called a vulva. But I had a lot of shame around how it looked, the smell, the taste, the wetness and all of that kind of stuff. Discharge as well, which doesn't get really talked about at all, but we all have it. And, it changes throughout our cycle and everything like that. So, yeah. And so I had just a lot around that kind of stuff to begin with. And then, the whole not being able to communicate, asking for what I want and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it began with this one person that I was sleeping with, that I ended up being in a relationship with for a couple of years. And she really helped me sort of learn to actually just love that part of me, and that there was really nothing to be ashamed of at all. And I'd done, various self-development courses and workshops and things like that. But that was more working on, you know, personality flaws that I thought I had.
Mm.
Um, which, when you do personal development, or when if you're a client and you get coaching, you actually very quickly learn that they're not flaws at all. Yeah, so then it kind of just sort of was sort of steady on that road for a little while. But I think that the real turning point was when I had slept with a guy, and he ejaculated inside of me, and I did not consent to that at all. And he refused to give me money for getting the emergency contraceptive pill, which also people know as the morning after pill. And I was like, are you kidding me? I felt so completely like worthless at that point. And I was like, you're literally, I didn't say that you could do that. I didn't want that. There's no way. I wasn't taking the pill. I've been naturally cycling for forever. Not really into taking the pill or anything. So yeah, it was like a huge shock for me. And then all of the emotions came back of like, I don't matter, I'm just a body, I'm just this person that they're doing this thing with. Yeah, and I think that was a real turning point for me, where I was like, you know what? Enough is enough, and I'm never, ever, ever going to let someone sort of walk over me, or I'm never gonna like let my boundaries be crossed like that ever again. And so I think that's where it changed for me. I started researching sex. I started looking into, ways that I could communicate and ask for what I want. I started to like actually look at, okay, well, what actually do I want? What is pleasurable for me? Because if I don't even know what's pleasurable for me, I don't know what to ask for. Yeah, and I started looking at like, okay, well, what is creating all of this like such low self-worth inside of me?
Mm.
So that's kind of that's kind of where it started. And then I actually wanted to start a sex toy brand, because then not long after that happened, I was in another relationship with a woman, and a lot of the dildos and things like that are out there, vibrators, very again phallic. They look like penises, with like the veins on them, or the flesh color, or multicolored and stuff like that. And I was like, at this stage, I was still very traumatized, and I was very like anti-men. So
Why
I
do I want this penis looking thing to be inside of me? Well, can't it be something else, you know? Yeah.
yeah. So I really looked hard and hard and hard, and there's not a lot out there that isn't sort of phallic looking. So so I wanted to design my own sort of sex toy line, and that caused me then to go even further into you know mostly female anatomy, which is where then I started to learn more about like the anatomy side of things that I had no idea about. So yeah, I haven't started my sex toy line, but it's in the works. I felt like I wanted to actually start with the coaching and really make that my focus first. Yeah.
That's a smart idea as well. And the good thing is that, it's on brand anyway. So when you do it, it will fit exactly what you're offering anyway, right? Sign up with me and I'll
Yeah.
send you a free dildo.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty
Yeah.
much. Hmm.
Hmm. Okay then. And so then when of course you started coaching and getting clients, how did you realize how common some of these things were? Or like were a lot of the things that women came to you about, like were they similar things? Were they separate things? Like talk a little bit about like what are some of the things that really women struggle with and actually come to you for?
Yeah. The number one thing is communication, asking for what they want.
Mm,
Um, and then body image and genital image as well. Yeah. So I was very fortunate in that before I started coaching, I was working as a like a beauty therapist, a dermal therapist. So I worked for a laser franchise. And before that, I was doing waxing and all sorts of things. So I've seen a lot of vulvas in my time, thousands. So I'm very fortunate in that I know that they all look different. Um,
oh, I see.
but unfortunately, uh, there is hardly any other professions that you would actually get to regularly see different vulvas. And so, a lot of women do have a very low genital sort of self-image. They think that it's yucky, they don't like it, they think it's shameful, they think it's wrong, it's, you know,
Mhm.
in some sort of way, they just really don't like it. And that also prevents them from experiencing as much pleasure as they could be. And also self image, just in general, like their body image, like not wanting to be in certain positions or not wanting to have the lights on or, be in a certain way where they're exposed and they feel like, oh my God, this doesn't look good. So those are a few of the things. Yeah.
Gotcha. And how much do you feel like the way that a lot of these women feel comes down to, from men or from society? Or like where do you think the real problems come from?
Yeah. Great question. I love this. Um, so media, so things like the fashion industry, and now, with the wave of like social media and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok even and all of that kind of stuff where we're really praised on how we look and how we show up on the internet
Yeah.
has hugely influenced how people view themselves because they're only seeing this like this image or these images of people online that have usually they've been edited or they're posing and stuff like that, and it's not a good representation of real life. And even things like the fitness industry and stuff like that, having this like picture of what healthy looks like, which you can't be any sort of um anything over like an unhealthy BMI or an unhealthy weight, and you can't have bulges or anything because you're deemed to be unhealthy, and which is not true at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and then we've got the medical industry as well on top of that, sort of as well, again saying that if you don't look this way, then you're unhealthy, or like if you eat this way, then you're unhealthy. And the rise of plastic surgery has been huge, over the past sort of 20 to 30 years. And like things like labiaplasty and, where you're literally changing the look of the vulva to make it seem, um, more acceptable, which is crazy because you can, there's a lot of cases where women lose sensation. And it's like, would you rather have a vulva that, looks like how a vulva should look, which is so many hundreds and thousands of different ways?
Mhm.
Or would you rather one that, looks like Barbie, but you have no sensation? It's ridiculous.
Definitely,
Yeah.
that's for sure. And of course, this is going to cause a lot of insecurities in women, which is, I'm sure why they come to you in the first place, right? Because
Mm.
they, one, don't have the education to feel insecure about their body or about how other people perceive them, and three, don't really realize that, as you said, there's 100,000 different ways a vulva can actually look. So you changing yours is like saying, I want to look like everybody else, right? When in fact, that's just not possible because, as you said, 100,000 bazillion different variations of vulva.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of describe it. It's like our face, you know. Everyone has the same parts, you know, everyone has two eyes for the most part, a nose, mouth, eyebrows, ears, that kind of stuff. A vulva is made of all the same parts, but it's just arranged differently. And, you know, everyone's is unique, just like our face is unique to us. And, you know, there's absolutely no need to go changing anything at all, you know. It is what it is, and it's beautiful, and it does what it's supposed to do, and it's self-cleaning and all sorts of things. So yeah, it's I'm a total pussy worshiper. So yeah, could talk about it for ages.
Sounds like you've got a lot of experience and knowledge in understanding it, right? Which is important for what you do.
Yeah, yeah.
So curious to understand from your perspective, because you mentioned how you had so many experiences, almost everyone with men that kind of were not pleasurable, which led to you deciding that that was no longer for you, right?
Mm.
Would you say you've dealt with those issues yourself, and how do you help women who are feeling that same way, like experiencing that? Because women deserve to ask for what they want, to enjoy their pleasurable experiences, but if so many men out there are focused just solely on getting themselves off, well, how do you help women to work through that? For the ones who are obviously, strictly going down
Pulling.
the lane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've still had these struggles in communication with the women that I've slept with, the people that I've been in relationship with as well. So it definitely doesn't go away just because you have same sex or opposite sex partner or any other type of gendered partner. Um, yeah, so a lot of the work I do comes in the way of communication. First and foremost, we find out, okay, what do you actually like? What is it that you want to actually ask for? What's pleasurable for you? And then we look at, okay, what kind of language is comfortable for you to speak in? Right? Because, you know, not everyone's going to be like, I want you to, you know, do this with my clitoris and this and that, or my outer labia. Like, you know, you don't want to use, you know, terminology like that or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah. And you're like,
You know,
what? Isn't it just a vagina?
yeah. Some people, you know, are very audio based, and they do just like to talk, but some people they prefer to show, and they're like, okay, do it this way. So we got to figure out like, okay, well, what kind of
Mm,
language suits you, what feels comfortable for you, because that is also a barrier. Like if you feel awkward even just saying the word clitoris, if you feel awkward saying these kinds of words, if you can't even say pussy, like there's straight away you're just going to be like, oh, I don't want to communicate. And then we look at, okay, like what are some of the things that are blocking you from communicating and asking for what you want? Like what is actually coming up for you in your mind and in your body before you actually even speak or use your gestures or whatever like that. So, and it's different for everyone. But a big thing is like rejection. You know, oh, I don't want to be rejected, or like being laughed at or being judged for what it is that you actually want.
mm.
Yeah, and like not knowing how it's going to be received by the other person. So yeah, then we, you know, depending on what it is, we kind of just work through that and trying to get to a place where you feel comfortable and it's like, oh, okay, actually, you know, that they're just these thoughts and these feelings that I have and these considerations that I have, but you know, you're projecting them onto that other person. They might not even be thinking those things whatsoever, and actually they could be so grateful that you're speaking what you want, because it takes the guesswork out of it for them as well. You know, a lot of us are generally just guessing what the other person wants until we're actually told. You know what I mean?
And if both people are faking enjoying something, then you get this false sense of understanding of what is actually good or is pleasurable. Because I did that to those three other people, and they were, they said it was good, but in reality, as you said, so many women pretend and fake it because sometimes they just want to get it over and done with in the end, right?
Yeah,
They want to hope
absolutely.
that it's going
Yeah.
to be different with this guy, but because they're not doing the work on themselves to actually learn how to communicate that stuff effectively, it continues to not be as pleasurable as it can be for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And like you're responsible for your own pleasure. Like it's not the other person's responsibility to be pleasuring you. Although they are, doing the things for you that are pleasurable, it's your responsibility. Like if your goal is to orgasm, is to climax, then you need to really guide that person as to how to get you there. So yeah, it's
Mm.
completely your responsibility. But me, my goal is to just completely change the way that people actually see sex, talk about sex. The number one thing that I always talk about with my clients, it's not, sex isn't something that you have. You didn't have sex. It's something that you do. So, sex is a doing word. You're not really like getting anything. You can't, acquiring anything. So you don't have sex, you do it. And so just even changing some of these little bits and pieces, these very small changes can really shift the whole dynamic around sex. But, it's pleasure based. It's not always orgasm based. You don't, the goal of orgasm shouldn't be the reason why you're doing sex. So, yeah.
And I think that's important for us to hear, because so many people out there, men and women, think sex is all about the climax, the ejaculation. That period is what you're building up to the whole time. When in fact, in reality, in a lot of sexual experiences, the most fun part of it has nothing to do with that, right?
Mm.
And that doesn't have to even occur on almost many occasions of sex, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like you got it. And sex doesn't even have to include penetration for it to be valid sex as well. I mean, I look back now and I feel so horrible for some of the things that I said, but the first time I was with a woman, I was like, well, this isn't sex. And I remember thinking like, no, like, where if you're just going down on each other, and like pretty much the experience is just we went down on each other and we were using our fingers and stuff. And I was like, well, this isn't sex, like it's, and then, but later on when I started looking into it more, I was like, oh, actually, like sex doesn't just have to be penetration. Like that's not what sex is. It's everything. It's the very, it's the beginning, it's the middle, it's the end, it's the aftercare, it's everything in between, it's the dirty texting and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's another thing because it's so male centric. Everything that we're taught about sex. So, like, even just the fact that penetration always has to be involved, and there always has to be a climax of some sort. Yeah, it's I'm really wanting to change that whole narrative.
What do you think needs to happen in order for that to be changed?
Education, I think, is a huge one. Like just educating people and getting it out there and trying to help change people's perspectives. And also getting people to actually go outside of the box and to have, date nights, or to have nights where there is no penetration involved, with their partner, and see what other things you can actually do to create pleasure with each other and have that shared experience. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. So Emma, I like to ask this question to everyone who comes on the podcast. Tell me, what does liberation mean to you as a woman? And you can talk about it in any context. So like, tell me what that means to you.
Oh, I love this question. So liberation to me is just being free of any expectations that anyone has on you and even yourself has like on yourself, because we all have expectations of ourselves, which is usually some sort of reflection of society's expectations or religious expectations and things. So, yeah, being liberated is just being able to be free and fully expressed in yourself, in your sexuality, and in your communication, all of that kind of stuff. The way you relate to people. Yeah.
Spot on. Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here, Emma. Before I actually, let everyone go, is there anything you'd love to, like a final message you'd love to hear, like leave with the ladies that are listening today?
Um, you come first. That's all I'm going to say.
And you can take that so many different ways, Emma. I love that. What a perfect way way to end it. Awesome, Emma. So can you tell the ladies how can people find you? Like how can they connect with you, Emma?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. So my name is Emma Rickard. And on Instagram, it's Emma Rickard _coaching. And yeah, and I also have a Facebook group as well. So the Facebook group is called It's My Pleasure. And yeah, I put extra juicy things in there that I don't put on my other feeds.
Awesome. So, ladies, if you want the extra juicy things and you're ready to take it to the next level, come join Emma Rickard's group because it's my pleasure. It's a nice play on the word. It's my pleasure as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all
Awesome.
about
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Emma, for being here today. It's been a pleasure getting to talk to you and sharing your wisdom here. Educational for me, and I'm sure educational for so many of the ladies out there. So appreciate you here. And for everyone else,
Thank you.
I'm going to be back here next week with another episode, but comment below, reach out to me if you've got any comments or questions, because I always love hearing from you, ladies, on the topic that we talk about each week. But until then, I'll catch you next week. Bye for now.